Good evening, race fans, and welcome to Podium Esports coverage of the second race in the first round for the 2021 eNASCAR Road to Pro Qualifying iRacing Series, live from the virtual Atlanta Motor Speedway in Hampton, Georgia. James Pike here, the voice of Podium Esports, and before we talk about tonight's race, let's take a look back at what happened in the season opener at the Las Vegas Motor Speedway 2 weeks ago.
And what's even more impressive is they come to the white flag. Retzlaff came down pit road before Bordeaux. Bordeaux's got the fresher tires. With the way he's been running this, Jeff McConey, that right rear on the 60 or the 04 truck looks gone.
It certainly does, and that will really hurt his corner exit. Now he needs to get momentum here and needs a good run down the backstretch, but 3 truck lengths is all that separates him from the win, and Parker Retzlaff has just 2 more corners to go for this checkered flag.
One more good set of corners, and it is going to be Parker Retzlaff with the number 42 Toyota Tundra that goes to victory lane. The Wisconsin native comes out west and takes the season opener for the eNASCAR Road to Pro Qualifying Series from Las Vegas.
It is now time to properly talk about tonight's eNASCAR Road to Pro Qualifying iRacing Series event from Atlanta Motor Speedway. Glad you're with us here on Podium Esports as we get set to bring you the second round of the season. James Pike, Evan Pasoko, Joshua Lee, Jeff McConey, and Ryan Bauer, our producer for the evening, getting set to bring you all the action from the Peach State as we go for 167 laps to continue this campaign. Evan, we saw Parker Retzlaff last week, and for a driver who's been much lauded coming into this Road to Pro qualifying series, the man who won the Grand National Tour in NASCAR's Track Pass service back in the spring, and the man who's been a short track ace in the service for years, showed why he is a threat to win the outright qualifying series title with his performance and his win in the top split at Las Vegas 1 week ago.
Yeah, and he had to do it on speed and on merit, right? That season opening race only saw 2 different yellows, some 16 different lead changes over the course of the race. So it's not like he lucked into a position, James. He put it to him and kind of set himself. No shock, though, with one of the highest I ratings out there, that he was able to make some noise in round 1. So he's going to hope now that he's got the target on his back. They're all going to be gunning for him as a young kid. It's not his first exposure to the eNASCAR ranks, but listen, he's been waiting for this moment for a long time, and he's got a good opportunity tonight to continue that in round 2.
He did it against some astounding competition. The strength of field for the top split last week was over 7,000, and it looks as if it's going to be over 7,000 once again tonight at Atlanta. Now, this, of course, part of the eNASCAR Road to Pro, which leads eventually to the eNASCAR Coca-Cola iRacing Series. This is the first step on that ladder. Any driver with a Class A oval license and a safety rating above 2.0 is eligible to participate. These drivers are separated by iRating into different splits. You earn points based upon your finishes. At the end of the first half of the season, the first 8 races, we will cut the field, and the top 70 drivers within the point standings at that point, Josh Lee, will advance into round 2, and we'll have 2 splits that will carry us the rest of the way to the season finale at Phoenix Raceway on September 30th. And at the end of that, the top 20 in points will advance to the eNASCAR Road to Pro Contender Series, with those who finish 21st or lower in the point standings from the eNASCAR Coca-Cola iRacing Series in 2021, and they will contest a handful of races to see which 20 advance into next season's Coke Series.
And you talk about how many people want to be at that top level of sim racing stock cars, and we had over 1,000 people registered last week and this week for the eNASCAR Road to Pro qualifying iRacing Series. A lot of drivers want those spots. Only 70 are going to move on to the next round, and then only another 20 from there move on to the Contender Series. You've got to show that you have the speed and that you have the talent to get to the top level of sim racing competition. You got to show it now. Time is running out for a lot of drivers.
In some respects, the competition level here in the qualifying series is even greater than what you see in the Coke Series on some nights, just because the pressure to perform is so much higher. Jeff McConey, we come to Atlanta Motor Speedway this evening, and it's a tricky track. It's one that will wear away tires pretty quickly, and one where the line can shift and change over the course of the evening. What do you have for us in tonight's race analysis?
Well, tonight is going to be, just like last time, all about the tires. You have to be careful. You have to take good care of them. So you got 2 laps of qualifying out there, which is what we're in the process of now. Typically, you don't see too many issues in qualifying. You're not going to go out there, hit the wall or anything like that. But it's important to get a good starting position. So this is where the money is right now. Then once the race starts, it's 167 laps, which sounds like a lot because it is a lot. It wears you out. It's very, very hard to get around this place that many times. 6 sets of tires for these drivers, and it sounds like plenty, but you can run through them fairly quickly here. 55 to 60 laps for the fuel window, but if we get a bunch of cautions, maybe 30, 40 lap runs, you kind of have to come in at that point. So be aware, and as soon as you see someone pit here, just like last time, you're gonna want to come to pit road as soon as you can. The tire fall off here is significant, well over a second, sometimes even 2. So you gotta come down, get new tires as soon as the first person does.
We've seen tires make all the difference here in the past, especially on late race restarts. If we get a late yellow flag, anybody with fresh tires is going to be at a huge advantage, so you want to hang on to what you have. Let's take a look at where we are in the world. We'll fly into the United States and zoom in all the way to Atlanta Motor Speedway in Hampton, Georgia, which is just about a half hour south of Metro Atlanta. We zoom into this complex, which was originally built in 1960 and updated for the 1997 season. They turned it in from a traditional oval to the quad oval that we have known for the past 25 years or so. The track, interestingly enough, has not been repaved since the reconfiguration, and that's part of the reason why the surface is so abrasive and why tire wear can be so important, like Jeff McConey said. Let's turn to our starting grid and tell you where your favorite driver is going to begin tonight's race, the second race of round 1 in the 2021 eNASCAR Road to Pro qualifying iRacing Series season. Tucker Minter, your pole sitter, with a 30.497. Jordy Lopez Jr. in the mix there. Seth DeMerchant, Matt Danson, Blake Justin Bolton, a former Coke Series driver, Evan Pasoko, heavy hitters in the first 3 rows.
And more former drivers as well. When you look back to the next couple of rows, Brady DeVulo is going to be alongside with Colin Keister. You got Derek Bordeaux and Jarrett Liebert through the top 10. And on row 6, a duo that includes Donovan Strauss and your race winner from last week. That's Parker Retzlaff.
Brian Mercurio, another fast driver, starting on the inside of row 7. Brad Mahar outside of row 7. Carson Hossever and Connor Horn, the duo on row 8. Then Michael Fenlison and Cody Bias, another former eNASCAR driver, on the outside of row 9.
Dylan Alt will be taking the grid in 19th, Trayton Lapsevich in 20th. He's a teammate of Parker Retzlaff, so watch for him, see if they can get to the front. Another teammate, Boyd Hogan, followed by Tyler Severa, Drew Farniers, Briar LaPrade in 24th.
Some short trackers here in the next few rows. Alex McCollum, who won the virtual snowball derby, and Devin Curl, who's got some speed of his own, mixed in with Dan Roper, Justin Lisenby, Casey Tucker, and Justin Levine. Kevin King, Larry Pace, Anthony Burrows, and Logan Kress complete the 34-car field for this top split of the eNASCAR Road to Pro qualifying iRacing series from Atlanta Motor Speedway. Let's take a look at the track facts quickly before we go green flag racing. This is, of course, Atlanta Motor Speedway in Hampton, Georgia, opened in 1960. It's a 1.54 mile, 2.48 kilometer circuit with 24 degrees of banking in the corners and 5 degrees of banking on the straightaways. Tonight we go for 167 laps, 257 miles, 414 kilometers. The in-sim time is March 20th. So this upcoming Saturday, just around 12:15 p.m. local time. Air temperature is 85 degrees Fahrenheit, track temp 103 degrees Fahrenheit, winds to the west at 8 miles an hour, and humidity of 70%. Jeff McConey, that track temp we figure will probably go up. How will that affect these drivers as the race progresses?
As the track temp increases, so does the lack of grip. It gets harder and harder and harder to maintain your speeds. When the track gets hotter, the times will get slower. So the more you wear out those tires over the long run, that's where it'll really hurt you. So be prepared here. I might even expect to see some guys short pitting because of that high track temp. Be aware, it's going to burn through those tires even faster than normal.
Maintaining a balance between short pitting and making sure you have tires for late race restarts, I think, will be key to victory at Atlanta Motor Speedway. But we're glad you're with us here on Podium Esports as we get set for race number 2 in the 2021 eNASCAR Road to Pro qualifying iRacing series season. Tucker Minter and Jordy Lopez, the first 2 trucks on the front row as the green flag unfurls in Atlanta, and we are racing. Tucker Minter to the point, but Evan Pasoko, biggest storyline, I think, in the opening laps of this race. Look at Logitech G Altus Esports with trucks 2nd, 3rd, and 5th as Justin Bolton races Matt Danson on the outside. But you see the VRS adorned hoods up there. They are coming to make a collective statement early on in this race.
And they all work together on the start right. I thought Tucker Minter was going to be in a tricky spot. We saw Jordy Lopez Jr. get to the inside on him with his teammates lined up behind. It was big for Minter to hold on, but how long can that last? To the inside comes Lopez again, and watch the 6 and the 24, because if Minter gets caught up by one of them, he'll probably get caught out by all of them. The 14 slides at a 2, and a new race leader at lap 4.
Nice work by Jordi Lopez to take the lead away, and he puts his Ford F-150 out front for Altus Esports. Now, Josh Lee, the inside versus the outside, always a classic debate here. Traditionally, the outside begins to open up more as the run progresses, but if you are Tucker Munter in the situation that you're in right now, where you're sort of stuck up there, is it going to kill you that much if you have to run the high line this early?
I don't think so, especially with the recent updates we've seen from iRacing. I was watching a couple of the C-Fixed races today in the top split. There were drivers running up against the wall and the middle line that were able to make passes. I just think if you're Tucker Minter right now, watch what your car is doing in that middle to top line. You might be able to find out something. You might be able to find some speed to use later on in the race. Early part of the race, I'm using this as a learning tool if I'm the 10.
To the inside he goes. I think he'll just drop in line and try and get there. But Jeff McConaughey, maybe one of the biggest things you have to worry about if you're on the inside racing somebody door to door, making sure that you keep air on the back end of your truck and that you don't get sucked around and get aero loose in the center of the corner. If you're down on the inside, you're Justin Bolton, you're Colin Keister. I think that's probably the number one concern you have at this stage.
It's definitely up there on your list of concerns. Pretty much what you want to do is if you're running the bottom, you want to paint that white line on the bottom. Just get as low as you can, keep that thing on the bottom, and make sure it doesn't snap loose on you. In these trucks, it's very easy for the back end to just kick around before you even notice that there's an issue, and they can be pretty difficult to save at times. So you have to be careful. When that back end starts to go around, it becomes your full concern, and you'll just burn up the rear tires. So the best way to prevent that from happening, don't let yourself get loose in the first place.
They tried to go 3 wide for a moment there. I saw another one of the Logitech Altus Esports machines try and take it up top, but back to 2 wide they go. And everybody, big trouble there for Matt Danson. He blew the motor, and I think that's a classic case of too much tape on the car. Kind of like what Blade Witt did at Homestead Miami in the Coke Series a few weeks ago. But Matt Danson's engine has gone up in smoke, and he will fall all the way from 5th to dead last, and then have to come down pit road and get his car fixed. So big misfortune for Matt Danson early on in this race, Evan.
Yeah, only could have been worse if he had his teammates involved, right? No yellow, so this is going to hurt because he's going to have to slowly roll to pit road. Danson 24th in the season opener, top split last week at Las Vegas. I didn't think he was running any closer to the cars in front of him compared to his teammates. You would have to think that that team is coordinated on what that tape number was going to be. So if Danson has issues this early on, ruins his race just barely a dozen laps into it, I'd be concerned about the other two running first and second at the moment, see if they have to adjust how they attack this race to keep that in mind.
Well, Lopez has the clean air on his nose out front, so I wouldn't necessarily be as concerned about him as I would be concerned about the number 57 of Seth the Merchant out of Skowhegan, Maine. That man from the Northeast may be in a world of hurt if he's got any sort of overheating issues the same way that we just saw with Matt Danson. So we'll keep an eye on DeMerch and see whether or not temps are an issue for his Chevy Silverado. Meanwhile, Tucker Minter out there and Justin Bolton up near the front of the field and trying to rebound after a tough run at Las Vegas last week, but still very clearly wants to get back to the Coke Series, and I think we know which team he'd love to be back for. Of course, he's an employee of Stewart Haas Racing and wouldn't mind returning to Stewart Haas Esports for the 2022 season should he qualify.
Yeah, and he needs to qualify for it. You can see the Coca-Cola logo up on the top banner, and he's currently running in 4th, and he's been running that middle line. And usually in iRacing, when you're running that middle to top line, you're either slower, trying to conserve something. Now we're seeing it as a definite line, and I'm watching these early guys start to experiment with that, and they're actually keeping up or passing cars up on the top line. So I'm expecting that middle of the top line to come in, especially once that inside starts getting greasy, but Justin Bolton's starting to use it really well as he is on the back bumper of Tucker Minter. Not exactly close enough to make a pass yet. He is a mirror full of Colin Keister in the 33 for Space Station Gaming.
Not a significant amount of movement up at the front yet, but Bolton has picked up 2 spots since this race started, but maybe more importantly, and maybe not to anybody's surprise, last week's winner Parker Retzlaff also happens to be one of the biggest movers so far in this race. Started in the 12th position, already up into the top 10, currently running 8th, trying to tackle Derek Bordeaux for 7th.
Well, Derek Berdoza to Spot Guys, of course, we talk about drivers who have previously been in the eNASCAR Coca-Cola iRacing Series, competed in 2017 and 18, a race winner in his first time out at Vegas, or at Daytona, I should say. Not a lot of drivers can claim that on their resume. He wants to get back to that very top step of the podium, up 2 spots already in this one, and seems pretty comfortable to just ride right now. We kind of questioned early, top or bottom, at least down in 1 and 2, everybody on the inside, and kind of at that second half of the racetrack down in 3 and 4 is where we're seeing a little bit more experimenting. But 14 laps into this race, things have single filed out just a little bit, and Jordi Lopez settling in as the race leader. See these drivers widen them out a little bit more down at this end of the racetrack is where they want to mix it up, but on board with Anthony Burrows in 29th. The mid-pack is where all that 2-3 wide action is.
And it hasn't really settled down since we dropped the green flag. As you look back at Walter, which technically is
It's his dog.
Yeah, technically isn't his dog, but is his dog, but isn't his dog, but is his dog. He may as well just go ahead and adopt it as the mascot proper, which maybe he already has since he's riding on the deck. But even still, Burrows has a little bit of work to do. Currently running the 29 spot. Another driver that goes into the same camp that Evan just discussed, of drivers trying to make it back into the top level of stock car sim racing. And another one who is on the move early. How about Cody Bias in the Napa Auto Care Center Toyota Tundra, running that number 20 machine. He was in the series 2 years ago, and I remember very vividly his run in the Pro Series in 2019. His race pivoted, and his whole season pivoted, rather, on the Richmond Raceway event that was middle of the season that year. Had the best car, came down pit road after a late race yellow, got caught up in a wreck, ended up 20th in that race, and ended up missing the cutoff by about 2 or 3 points. That's how close Cody Bias was to being a Coach Series driver a year ago. I have a feeling he hasn't forgotten about that one, Jeff McConaughey, and I think that's more than enough fuel to the fire to get him back towards the top level of competition.
It's hard being that close, and it's hard for any of us to imagine being that close and being just a few points off, but if there's one thing that drives race car drivers, it's wanting to prove themselves and wanting to get what they were so close to grabbing. So I think that'll definitely be influencing him. However, bear in mind, you don't need to go out and win every race. You don't need to be really, really good in one race and then bomb the rest. That's not how it's done here. You need to be consistent. You need to be fast across all respects. So if he goes out and finishes second, that's better than wrecking for the win. So I think he'll take the lessons that he's learned the first time around. I think he'll come into this with knowing that he can make it to that next level. I think we'll see a lot out of him here.
Looking out the front of Brian LaPrade, running in the 18th spot, right behind Trayton Lapsevich, brother of 2016 NASCAR 50 Series champion Caden Lapsevich out of Canada, and the Reaper Speed Lab Toyota Tundra, looking for some room around Tyler Separa. But to the point that you just made, Jeff McConaughey, and an interesting one at that, just with the way the point system is structured here in the eNASCAR Road to Pro qualifying series, it does pay well to finish consistently well, but the one thing you don't want to do, and the one thing that won't help you, is finish in the back of the field, especially in the top split, because it pays more points for you to win second split than it would to finish, say 15th or 20th in this split. And as you look at the top 25 in points entering this evening, there are 5 split winners that are in that top 25. Some folks that didn't even compete in the top split last week, but won some of the highest splits in competition, are up in that top 25. Santiago Tires, Will Norton, Ethan Lane, and Brody Kostecki, who won the second, third, fourth, and fifth splits respectively. So to that end of it, it's good finishes and consistent finishes in the top 5, top 10 that really help you the most in your efforts to make the contender series.
And looking over those points like you were just talking about, James, there's a lot of names up there that we did not see in our broadcast here at Podium of the top split or the STN broadcast over the second split. They're coming from the bottom splits because until you get to the contender series, your split does not matter. You get the same amount of points as anybody else would. You just got to race in your split. So we're seeing some drivers from the lower splits start to peak their way up into the top 25 and definitely in the top 70, trying to fight for that cutoff spot come the end of this round and into round number 2 of the championship.
That plus these splits are fluid per se. Just because you race in top split one week doesn't mean that you're going to end up in top split the next week. These splits are separated in real time based upon your oval I rating on this night when we hit 9 p.m. and the servers launch. So we can see some names shuffle in and out of these top splits that you can see broadcast on Podium Esports, and they may shuffle down to the second split broadcast, which you can see from our folks on STN. They're currently streaming STN_racing on Twitch, and we invite you to fire up two windows, a multi-Twitch link, whatever you like to do in order to watch all this best as you see this great action in the middle of the pack. But multiple ways to watch the top two splits of the eNASCAR Road to Pro qualifying series, which Podium and STN will have for you all season long. So get used to it. You're going to have wall-to-wall truck racing every other Thursday night. Tony Lopez Jr. is your leader after 23 laps completed of 167. Nice little pack that these drivers have taken two out front, and I think a lot of these drivers are just trying to rip off the laps. Not really much battling amongst the top 10. You have to go all the way back to about maybe the 20th spot or so. Your first side-by-side battle at the moment, Dylan Alt and the Waltermobile, Anthony Burrows, that we talked about a moment ago. As we look on board at Carson Hocevar, we see what Hocevar's machine can do.
Well, he's one of the cars that when we were just on board with about a lap or two ago was kind of all over the racetrack, right? He, Dan Roper as well, moving high, moving low. And again, no more than a dozen laps ago, guys, all the cars down in turns 1 and 2 were on the bottom. Now they're going way up to the outside wall. Hocevar just squeezed the 8 car of Drew Farinaj up against the fence, and they're all starting to experiment. And we talked a lot about how the tires would fall off. I know on Tuesday night after a run, we said about 2.5 seconds plus of tire fall off, fresh to old. And now that we've gotten to this point in the run, these drivers are able to open things up just a little bit more, able to make passes as Burrows looks back down to the inside of Farinaj. And to look at turns 1 and 2, completely different than the opening part of this race.
Oh, and it gets close, and Farinaj gets pummeled into the fence, and Anthony Burrows has nowhere to go. Justin Lisenby goes around sideways and spins, hits the inside retaining wall on the back straightaway, but they stay out of the racing line, and we will stay green flag racing. But Burrows with disaster early on. The Waltermobile had nowhere to go, and he just pounded Farinaj, and all three of Farinaj, Burrows, and Lisenby down pit road and very likely out of contention, maybe well out of the race, Jeff McConaughey.
I think it's just too early for that. 27 laps in. We talked about drivers moving around, James, and trying to find some space. But we talked a lot about loose conditions. But once that thing goes up the hill, you can't really catch it. And here's Burrows' view right into the back of Farinaj off of the corner. And a lot of unhappy radio chatter, I can promise you now. And it almost spooked some of the other drivers because it was just starting to get exciting back here. We had that contact, and all of a sudden everybody else is saying, you know what, you can have the spot. So I don't know if that was a wake-up call shy of 30 laps in, but obviously Andrew Farinaj not happy, and the 42 drives away pretty okay for being the one that kicked it all off.
Yeah, if you're Dylan Alt, how lucky do you feel? If you're Logan Kress, how thankful you are that the seas parted right in front of you. He almost put Justin Lisenby and had nowhere to go. And then at the last second, everything opened up for him, and Kress is able to carry on, albeit in 28th. But back to the point that was being made just before that incident happens. And Evan, I think you were the one on it, that tire fall off here won't be as significant just because the top speeds of these trucks are a little bit lower than what you see with the Cup Series cars. But it should be in the same sort of ballpark. So maybe somewhere in the ballpark of high 1.7, 1.8 seconds over the course of a green flag run, just because the aero package is so similar between the Truck Series and the Cup Series. It is not all that different. The speeds are the biggest change between the trucks and the Cup cars. Otherwise, it's very similar racing, so you're going to start to see these drivers explore lanes as they did on Tuesday night. You're going to have to watch for tire wear as they did on Tuesday night as well. Meanwhile, just a little bit further back, how about Donovan Strauss looking to the inside? His number 51, the JDR Graphics Toyota Tundra, fighting Derek Bordeaux for that 8th position.
Ooh, and he's going to get a little bit bit too far up coming off of turn 4. Might have made some contact with that 04 up on the outside line. They keep it going all forward though, and you can see that 20 of Cody Bias sitting right behind in the Napa Auto Care Toyota Tundra. A little bit of a group of 4 cars going up here. You can even go back to the Logitech G Altis 01 of Brandon Boulos, all racing together. And the 51 stuck on the inside line. It looks like a huge train of 3 cars on the outside line go right on by. And still battling up further up, that's Blake Neer and Derek Bordeaux. Neer going to lead this group back to the point off of turn 4.
Near leads that group. Meanwhile, Seth DeMerchant took the lead from Jordy Lopez at the front of the field. So move the 57 up to P1. Lopez now running that middle lane, and I almost wonder if that truck might be tightening up just a bit as Tucker Minter is right behind Lopez. You look out the rear window at Seth DeMerchant's number 57 car, and DeMerchant trying to maintain the control for Logitech G Altis Esports at the front, but still that 4-trunk train and then a bit of a gap to guess who? Parker Retzlaff, who is up 6 spots from where he started in the opening 30 laps.
And you see that battle still going on back there as we're on board with Boulos right now. You can see the 51 diving up the inside of Cody Bias, trying to make that move happen, just unable to make it happen still, lap 33.
Bias, I think, biding his time, no pun intended there, but there is plenty of time to make this happen. These trucks will spread out a little bit if this race goes on a long green flag run, but you don't necessarily have to push. It goes back to the point that you made, Evan, that, you know, you don't have to go crazy on lap 25. I think the interesting thing that we saw out of Freenash in particular right before that incident was that you've got trucks that are not only trying the top lane but are beginning to figure out how to make it work, because and that incident happened in part because of the run that Freenash got on that high side. He was about 5 to 10 miles an hour faster than the trucks underneath him, and as he came past, it was just too much to try and get the trucks underneath him to loosen up. But the speed is there on the outside next to the wall if you are brave enough to run there.
Yeah, I mean, earlier in the race, if you're that truck on the bottom, nobody's getting to your outside, right, off of turns 1 and 2. So you can enter it kind of a half a lane up or so, get down to the bottom, swing out to the fence at a 2. It's not a problem. Again, as that track kind of rubbers in, the tires fall off a little bit and things change. That outside was an option, and it's just a matter of committing to the corner and kind of overwalking it just a little bit. I know that Jordy Lopez Jr. was the leading car of those Logitech G Altis Esports entrants, but again, as you mentioned, DeMerchant has cycled his way through, and to the point of aggression, I mean, that's the point that Josh made real early in this race, right? You're using the start of this as a test. You're basically kind of mapping out what a full fuel and tire run is going to be like now, so you know how to best optimize that for later in the race. I don't think anybody wanted to be driving into each other 24 or whatever laps into the race, but that's the situation we find ourselves in, and a lot of those lapped cars are now going to be limping around the racetrack. That's Farina's just ahead of your leaders, fresher tires, so the leaders may not get up to him quite that quickly, dependent on damage, but the more of those damaged cars that end up on track, the more they'll be a factor as this run goes on, as we get into some of the pit strategy and whatnot.
We should see pit strategy come up. We should see some more racing too. They are starting to get door to door up towards the front of the field, and they're starting to work the lap traffic as well. You see Drew Freenage right up at the front of your screens here, and you can see the gap that he's got as Freenage comes through turn 4. You look just a little bit further back, and there's your lead pack of DeMerchant and Lopez and Minter and Justin Bolton, who's found some speed up on that high line. He's gotten around Colin Keister, and Bolton is up into the 4th position now. So watch that 10 machine, the Busch Light car. Truck rather, now looking for some speed to the outside of Tucker Minter, who's trying to go to the inside of Jordy Lopez.
And something I was just following, James, listening to the voice chat, some server issues going on across many splits. Jeff McConey also mentioning it in our broadcast chat, but that's going to be something these guys got to watch for now. Once they know that those servers started to go a little bit, it might be almost like a rain situation in real life NASCAR. Are they racing to a certain point in this race to possibly get a race result? Or are they going to try and just stretch this all the way to the end of 167 laps? That's going to be a huge thing that these drivers now have to think about, along with the racing that's going on the current racetrack.
looks to me, just off the timing and scoring and what I can see, Jeff, that it's Tyler Severa and Kevin King who are the two that have been affected in this race. So it's two, maybe the three there, Burrows, Liebert, Danson, maybe Liebert as well. The 2 or 3 drivers, I think, affected by those issues in this split.
James Liebert was one a little bit earlier on. Sorry to cut in there, but he was one earlier on that he disconnected around lap 10 or 15, somewhere around there. So could be related to the server issues Jeff was just talking about, or it could be something completely different. Sorry, Jeff.
So a lot of spotters as well have also dropped out here. So a lot of these drivers will be racing with a crew chief or a spotter, and all of a sudden they lose that. They lose that person, their eyes in the sky just disappears on them. So we've had a few more cases of those people dropping out. This is going to be something that's interesting. That definitely adds a lot of anxiety and stress to an already stressful event here. These guys have been practicing for 2 weeks. It's their chance at making it up into the Coke Series, and to have it ruined by internet issues or server issues is a feeling unlike any other. So be aware that it's not just the drivers that are dropping out, but their crew behind the scenes as well.
Which really can change things. For those who aren't familiar with the way things work, especially at these top levels with the top teams, whether or not it's the Coach Series or Road to Pro, normally in a standard iRacing event, it's just going to be you, yourself, and whatever spotter the sim provides you. But when you're competing at this level, any driver in the Coach Series, the Contender Series, in this Road to Pro qualifying series at the top split, they'll have a team of about 2 to 3 people. They'll have a spotter, they'll have a crew chief, they'll have folks that can help them develop strategies, tune the car properly, and help them figure out how to get to victory lane. It really is a team effort, much like you see in real life. And it's something that you don't really see or hear much when you watch these broadcasts, but they're all there. Any race, a top split like this, you might have 30 drivers competing, but anywhere from maybe 70 to 80 people are actively involved trying to get their team, their truck, their driver to victory lane.
And in some cases, it actually allows them to get a little bit more information, or at least sooner than you would on an actual racetrack, right? Because a lot of the time, if you have contacted a real racetrack, you get a little bit of damage, you're often asking the team photographer to get you a shot of that car. You can actually get your spotter, your crew chief, whoever who's in the sim with you, just pinch it on the truck, let them know how much damage is it. You can go back and forth on strategy. You don't need to worry about that as a driver. Of course, my concern would be if my driver, I should say my crew chief had the strategy for this race and he drops out and is worried about getting reconnected to the session, I'm on my own for a little bit. So that also goes to show you that you can't totally rely 110% on the rest of the team. You have to have an understanding of the game plan, as well as that chatter about pit stops, guys, heating up. A battle for second, looking to the bottom. The Merchant's going to stay out for now, but more cars diving in.
There goes Tucker Minter down the pit road, and Jeff McConey, I think you were the one who talked about potential short pitting. Derek Bordeaux, Cody Bias, Daniel Roper, all coming down pit road here this last time by. Minter looks like he's going to be joined by Blake Mears, so we are seeing drivers who are going to try and add a few stops to this race and run the short stints. If it goes green flag, they might be in for something.
The Logitech G Altus Esports guys talking about it really quickly over the voice chat. They're all coming in along with Bolton and Keister.
A lot of these drivers now, as soon as they heard one person call that they were pitting, immediately the whole chat lights up. It's pretty quiet during the race, everyone's focused, but one person calls they're pitting. Seth the Merchant had some contact. Oh, there he goes, trying to hold on to it on pit road there. So very, very difficult to get to pit road at times. But it's important. Once one person hits pit road, you'll see a bunch more come.
Very tricky there as the Merchant had to back up just a bit in his stall, so I suspect he'll probably lose the race lead to his teammate Jordi Lopez Jr. And then the question will be just how many spots he loses compared to the rest of the field. Shouldn't be much, I don't think, but Lopez does indeed beat his teammate out, and then Bolton, and then that's Donovan Strauss in the JDR Graphics Toyota Tundra, who sits there in the 4th spot for Elliott Sadler Esports. They should all cycle around to the front with Bordeaux. Connor Horns also come down pit road already. We're seeing a few more drivers come in. Colin Keister, Parker Retzlaff, Brian Mercurio, Dylan Alt, Trayton Lapsevich, Brian LaBrad, Alex McCollum. Your set of drivers that are in on lap 46. It leaves Boyd Hogan, Casey Tucker, Logan Kress, and Carson Hosevar as the final 4 drivers yet to make their opening pit stop of the evening.
And guys, courtesy of the pit stops and some of those drivers coming in for the short pit, the likes of DeMerchant and Lopez have dropped back a handful of spots. It's going to be Horn along with Bordeaux, Minter and Bias, Mahar even all ahead of Lopez, DeBurchin, and Bolton, those race leaders who came down to the pit lane at the same time. Now, reverse side of the strategy, the cars who pitted later gave up the track position. They will have the better tires, but just keep in mind as Jordi Lopez gets ahead of his teammate Seth DeBurchin, not for the overall lead. They're going to have to start to pick off some cars as we await about 4 more drivers to come down pit road before we put a button on this first cycle to green flag pit stops.
So you've got drivers here that look like they might...
Most of ours spin to the grass, James.
Trouble for Carson Hocevar, who is going to bring out the first yellow of the evening with that spin, and it will trap a lot of people in bad spots. You're going to have a lot of wave arounds on this yellow flag. It was the last thing that anybody that had already come down pit road had wanted to see, but for Hogan, Tucker, and Logan Crest, that trio has to be elated with the yellow. As you see what happened to Hocevar on your screens, just missed pit entry outright. There's not really much you can say about that, Jeff McConaughey.
Yeah, it looks like he just got a little bit too low off of turn number 4 and it got into the grass and brought it to a stop on track. So that's very unfortunate there as he brings out the first caution. It was a last-minute decision to avoid pit road. Looked like he was going to come down and pit and then realized he was coming in too hot and brought it back out onto the track. Didn't want to slide up into the wall, so he came to a stop there. But like you said, that's going to be great for the guys that are up front, and it's going to trap a lot of cars a lap down. Most notably, Michael Fenlinson should be the lucky dog. Briar LaPrat, his teammate, he's going to be 1 lap down still. Braden Bolos, Brian Mercurio, Alex McCullum, all those guys that all just came down pit road are now trapped a lap down and going to have to take a wave around.
A lot of these drivers are going to have to figure it out, and we'll see Boyd Hogan and Casey Tucker and Logan Cress all come down as lead lap trucks for service. But a few questions that come to mind on the Hocevar machine. The first is you saw when he bounced off of the grass, or rather the asphalt into the grass, that truck actually got some air coming on that transition. And it does look like there's some damage to the right front of Hocevar's machine as a result. That's piece 1. So 2 is how does that affect his truck going forward? And then 3, even if you're going to see a lot of these drivers take wave arounds, how is that going to affect the racing when you're going to have that trio that stayed out of Hogan and company? He and Tucker and Cress are going to have the freshest tires of anybody in the field, and how will their trucks perform in comparison to everybody else? It's an interesting notebook scenario, Jeff McConaughey, and I think it's one where we're going to see the value of maybe 5 lap fresher tires compared to the rest of the field, which might not be much, but again, if we get a late race restart with 2, 3, 4 laps to go, might be a perfect test case to see just how much it might be worth it to pit in that kind of situation.
Well, I think even just 3, 4, or 5 laps definitely makes a big difference. Take a look at our pole sitter. Tucker Minter, a 31.054 was his quickest lap, and then about 5 laps later, he's running 4s and 5s and 6s. So the tires fall off quickly here. By the end of the run, his fastest lap was a 31.0. By the end of the run, he's running 33.1s. So it's quite the fall off there. Over 2 seconds of fall off. Even just a couple laps would be 3 or 4 tenths.
Tire strategy, tire strategy, tire strategy. Panning out early in the second race of the eNASCAR Road to Pro qualifying iRacing series here on Podium Esports. Don't go anywhere. More action from Atlanta coming up right after this. Back with more coverage of the eNASCAR Road to Pro qualifying iRacing series from Atlanta Motor Speedway. This is the second race of the season. James Pike, the voice of Podium Esports, alongside Evan Pasoko, Joshua Lee, Jeff McConaughey, and our producer Ryan Bauer, with cameras provided to us this evening by the one and only Dougie Beard. And Jeff McConaughey, a bit of a wild situation here with the first yellow flag.
Yeah, it's a It's a very difficult pit road to get onto here at Atlanta, but I think there's a lot of people out here that are very thankful. There was a caution at that point. A lot of people are trapped a lap down and now don't get those fresh tires. So it was a very convenient caution for some people and a very inconvenient caution for other people. But Carson Hocevar locked down the car. He says he has, in the chat, he says he has no brakes, but he brought it to a stop there on track, and they got it pointed in the right direction and rolling again. But lap 53 now for these drivers here, getting ready to go back green.
I think when you talk about the pit entry in Atlanta, it doesn't get the press that, say, a Dover or a Las Vegas would, where everybody knows that those pit entries are some of the toughest to get into in all of NASCAR, or eNASCAR for that matter. But Atlanta is up there and trickier than you would think. It's not the easiest place to get down to pit road on, so you definitely have to mind your P's and Q's, decelerating and coming down through the gears to get to pit road speed at Atlanta, and make sure that you actually get down pit lane, lest you want to end up like Carson Hocevar, who is now scored in 15th and has damage. As we go back, green flag racing, Jordi Lopez Jr. with that nice jump on the inside. Brad Mahar sent the Merchant, Colin Keister up at the front, and the Merchant and Keister immediately with the good run to the inside to get around Mahar's machine. And as we go back, green flag racing, we'll step aside for a moment and let you all listen to the sounds and see the sights of the eNASCAR Road to Pro qualifying iRacing series at Atlanta Motor Speedway. Wasting no time trying to get some action here in Atlanta. 3 wide, just behind this group. You see it there on the right side of your screen. Logan Kresh, Connor Horn, Justin Bolton, all there. And Brad Mahar sliding back on the outside as looks like Connor Horn had a big run through the middle down the front straightaway and managed to leapfrog everybody to make his way into the top 10 for the first time.
Well, Connor Horn's one of those guys who, amongst your race leaders who had already completed a pit cycle before the caution came out, decided that he wanted to come back in for tires. Again, that whole group, which was a majority of the field, had only done about 5 to 6 laps on the tires before the yellow came out, and it was a split strategy on if they wanted to stay or if they wanted to come again. So right now, the cars up front, Lopez to Merchant, Keister, they said, we'll take the 6-lap-old tires to save a set for later. So they are on older tires than the likes of Derek Bordeaux, Casey Tucker, and in that case, Tucker Minter and Connor Horn. That little bit of a tire advantage. See if it plays out for them through this run.
So there are 2 groups of drivers then that we're working with. There's our trio that got to come down after staying out, the Boyd Hogan, the Logan Kresh and company. Casey Tucker also in that boat. They've only stopped once, and then you've got about 5 or 6 drivers that have come down twice. Derek Bordeaux leads that group in 4th at the moment, but Tucker Minter is part of that group, as is Connor Horn, as is Justin Bolton, as is Cody Bias, as is Daniel Roper. Everybody else with the 1 stop and staying out on the old tires that they have. So that could be important to note if we get a rash of late race yellow flags that forces drivers to come in for tires again and again and again, as we see Derek Bordeaux go to the inside of Jordi Lopez Jr. to take over the top spot on lap 60 of 167.
We talked about Bordeaux, one of those drivers who came down pit road. He already made his green flag stop, came down again under that yellow flag. He pitted last on lap 50, grabbed 4 tires, and he is now up to the lead. He said before this race started on his Twitter that he has a very good truck, feels really confident, and is looking for a solid finish to stay near the top of the point standings. Is in the exact spot he needs to be, leading the way over to Logitech G Altus Esports cars. And Colin Keister trying to go down to the inside in that Space Station Gaming number 33 Ford F-150. And look who's right there, rounding out the top 5. Last week's winner, Parker Retzlaff, breathing down their necks as they go back into 1.
Essentially no surprises that we're seeing some very big names leading this field as you ride on board with last week's winner, Parker Retzlaff, just trailing Seth the Merchant's Machine and sitting in tight behind the 57, watching his line, trying to see if he can learn anything over the course of these opening laps of our second proper green flag run, if this can hold for a little bit. But as it stands, if you're Retzlaff, you have to be thrilled, I think, with the way this race is going for you. How about Casey Tucker, though? Same thing, maybe even more so. Tucker started 28th, and even though he's outside of 3 wide there with Tucker Minter and Justin Bolton, still to go from 28th to, I guess, 8th, maybe 9th now, as you see Connor Horn and Cody Bias get to the inside. Still a tremendous return early on in this race.
So I've been doing some math here behind the scenes, and pretty much I don't think the guys that took that second set of tires are really behind the 8 ball at all. You have 6 sets here for 167 laps, so you break the race into 7 segments, right? You take tires 6 times, you break the race into 7 segments for those new tires. But you always want to keep 1 set of tires for the end for a green-white checkered, so really you've got 5 sets to play with. So break it down into 6 sections. You get roughly 26 laps or so. When those guys came down for their second set, it was about lap 54. So they're well in that window to take that second set and be okay, still be on schedule. I don't think that's going to come back to bite them because they're on schedule. So it should be good. I think that was a good call. And if you're one of the guys that took that second set, I really think you made the right decision.
I think the only scenario, Jeff, and I'll come right back to you on this because I want to play devil's advocate here. The only scenario in which they may end up in trouble is you see that great battle for second between Minter and Keister and Lopez and company. But the only scenario in which they end up in trouble is if we get a yellow with maybe, 15 laps to go, then 10 laps to go, then 5 laps to go, but short stints of green flag racing towards the end where you may see drivers come in once or twice, and then the folks who have come in twice already don't have that final set of tires to work with. Is that about the only case where they end up taking the L there?
That's correct. So pretty much what they don't want is a bunch of cautions. Any decision that you make in racing, you're gambling. You're banking on one outcome over another. So right now they are banking based on what they think and the trends and everything else that there will not be many cautions. And to avoid sounding too much like Larry McReynolds while still paying homage to Larry McReynolds, we're going to talk about trends. Last week there was just 2 cautions at Las Vegas, and here so far we're getting close to halfway and we've seen 1 caution. And it was a fairly avoidable incident because it was just someone missing pit road. So it wasn't a full-on wreck, though we did see one earlier that ended up not being a caution. I'm not expecting a bunch of cautions here. I'm not expecting a bunch of torn-up trucks at the end. This is the top split of the top series for a reason. These guys are really good, and they all know what they're doing. So I don't think there's going to be a bunch of cautions. So if I had to put my chips on something, I would put it on there being not too many cautions, play the aggressive strategy, take the second set of tires because you're probably not going to burn through all of yours. That would be my gamble.
Mathematically speaking, I think you're probably right, but again, we're working with probability and chances, which means that while the numbers may suggest one thing, we may end up with another, especially it being March and a little bit mad after all for certain reasons. Wouldn't be totally crazy, would it?
There it is, James Pike, the North Carolina man with the March Madness reference. You're absolutely right. It all depends. We're trying to put numbers and statistics on the way people drive, and if there's one thing harder to calculate than the human mind and figuring out what it's going to do next, then I would love to hear it. But based on what we're seeing so far, I think that's the right call, but maybe that's why I'm up here in the booth and not driving or crew chiefing one of those trucks down there, because it's really hard to figure out what the one singular right call is going to be.
Of course I was going to get the March Madness reference in there, but you being a Boilermaker in Indiana, me being in North Carolina, it's sort of in our blood, I think.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. Boiler up. The Big Ten, someone in the Big Ten is going to win it. Purdue's got a good chance at it. I think Sweet 16 is a safe bet, but we'll see. Zach Edey, shout out to him. That man is awesome.
Evan, do you want your moment to have your Go Blue reference?
You guys are just wasting your time because Michigan's got it, but I was just going to let you guys have your fun, and we'll do the talking on the court.
I like that thought. All I'll say is I've got an Illinois-Ohio State Final Four, and if you're so inclined, you go to the Gen Chat on the Podium Discord. We do have a bracket game available for people, so if you want to challenge yours truly and see if your bracket's better, jump in. We have a lot of fun this time. Back to the racing, though. Tucker Minter, you're riding on board with now. He's dropped to 8th, riding with that number 10 machine for Nexus Esports, the Splash and Go graphics, Chevy Silverado with Cosminana shoes, liveries, which paint schemes, what have you. Certainly depends on the series, the category, but you know that those cars usually are going to be fast. He's riding right behind Cody Bias in the 7th spot, and those two have had solid runs up to this point, Josh Lee, as you see Connor Horn looking for another spot, this time to the inside of Justin Bolton.
And they're going side by side coming off of turn 2. Cody Bias also experimenting, running up closer to the wall, similar to a sprint car at Eldora, barely touching that back quarter panel along the wall. We've seen it in the past week in the practice sessions and the test sessions that line is fast. These guys can run that. Question is, will they be able to run it for long? Even a slight tap to the wall, slight damage to any of these trucks that could affect them aerodynamically. They're going to be falling right back down the order. And just as quickly as Bias experimented up to the top side, he's going to go right back to the low side, trying to get a 2-for-1 deal, trying to get by the 34 of Connor Horn and the 10 Busch Light F-150 of the 23 of Justin Bolton, who was not able to do either of them. Back to the inside to try and get back by the 14.
To the inside he goes. Bolton there with a move to clear Connor Horn. Cody Bias now holding the inside as Minter looks high. This is some of the best action on track here. Your front 2 or 3 have spaced out. And oh, by the way, Casey Tucker's just ahead of this group, and they are starting to put together that classic Atlanta fan. Out of turn 2, you see drivers swoop 2 and 3 wide on corner exit just because the corner exit here is so long, Evan.
Yeah, it is, and that's kind of what got us in trouble with that little bit of contact we saw there in turn 2 earlier in this one. And one thing I'm noticing over this run, right, is those Logitech trucks have been separated. Once upon a time, they were kind of running all together, 2, 3, 4 on track, right? Jordy Lopez Jr. has been one of the best to hold them off, but it's these guys, the Tuckers, the Boltons, the Horns, on that little bit of fresher rubber that has separated them. Seth the Merchant's fallen all the way down to position number 9, nearly into the grasps of the likes of Dan Roper and Logan Kress, who came from the 20s and 30s on the starting grid. Derek Bordeaux, the only driver able to break through and clear. Look at the difference, about 9/10 of a second between your race leader and the big single file train behind Lopez in second.
And that is a 5-lap difference on tires between Bordeaux and Lopez. And at least as of now, Jeff McConey, Bordeaux's performance is justifying everything you said just a few moments ago with regards to pit strategy and coming in twice early.
I guess I was right about something. Ain't that a great feeling here? Yeah, I think that was definitely the right call. We saw a bunch of trucks lined up single file, and look at him. He's got a full second lead over second place Jordy Lopez, and he's not only maintaining it, he's growing it by about 0.5 a lap. That last lap was a 32.94, and the last lap for Jordy Lopez was a 33.06. One driver out here still running down in the 32s ahead of everyone else. That's Derek Bordeaux. He's got a really, really good truck under him, and he was very wise in making that decision to come down for the second set of tires. They are invaluable at Atlanta, and I guarantee you the competitors are looking at this, and their crew chief's pencils are smoking, writing down notes on what to do next.
It makes it so enticing to try and come a little bit earlier and short pit everybody else as we look at Daniel Roper running in the 9th spot for High Performance Motorsports and Amuka Esports there, working alongside Seth the Merchant. He's going to slide up in front of the 57 and take away the line, and the Merchant will immediately respond, come right back down to the inside. He's seen that one a few times before here. He knew it was coming, just had to get down to the bottom in time. However, Roper, I think, can carry the momentum high on corner exit as the front end gets free on the 57, and the Merchant has no choice but to slide in behind Roper, who takes over 9th, sends Seth the Merchant back to 10th.
And DeMerchant got loose also coming off of turn 2 last time by when Roper came up and slammed the door. Now to the inside of DeMerchant is going to go the 96 of Boyd Hogan. Now on the inside of him, and Roper now trying to pull away from this group, catch up to the cars in front. It's a group of Bias, Minter, Horn, and Bolton now up ahead of the 61.
They just have not stopped fighting as Parker Retzlaff is there on your screens, and you see the winner from Las Vegas working over Donovan Strauss. This is a really good group that just has not separated itself, and you've got some interesting names and different pit strategies in here too. Logan Kress was one of the ones who was able to stay out. He's in here. Boyd Hogan is in here in the Reaper Speed Lab machine, and you've got Connor Horn up on the outside as well.
Well, Retzlaff is on the back foot this whole run, right? And I think I'm buying in to what Jeff was talking about when we look at the difference on these tires, right? These, cars were so concerned about saving a set. They wanted 5 more on pit road instead of 4. And Retzlaff, who had been making forward progress after starting this race in 12th, got to the top 10, has only gone backwards on this run, right? Getting passed up and a bit of a bobble there. Connor Horn cuts him a break, or he could have drove through him off the corner. Horn, another driver who decided to get the extra set of tires when that yellow came out. He is going to be faster than him. Behind him, you've got Hocevar, who's likely going to be faster. So all these drivers on the back foot. You might not think 5 laps of tires makes a difference, but on a long green flag run like this, where that's allowed to play out, it has really decidedly hurt those cars who did not want to come in and burn that extra set.
I think the other intriguing piece of this, just looking at that group in particular, is that if you can maintain track position and you're on the other side of this, like a Retzlaff, where you've got the old tires and you only came down once, as you look off the rear deck lid and you see Justin Bolton on your screens, but Michael Finlayson, another one in the 36 machine that I think is worth mentioning here. He also was one of the ones to stay out and would not come down pit road for tires, and yet still is hanging on to 14th, so not a bad job for the Lockdown Racing driver.
And taking a look up to the lead once again, Bordeaux still pulling away up to 1.7 seconds, the gap between first and second from Bordeaux back to Lopez. Derek Bordeaux just checked out from the field in the 04. He's up 8 spots from where he originally started back in 9th, trying to keep this lead for as long as he can as we work now onto lap number 83. And the 04 is starting to experiment with the other lanes as well. He's running the middle line through 1 and 2 this time.
Just about at the halfway point here as you see just how far Derek Bordeaux has stretched this lead. It is up to 1.7 seconds on Jordy Lopez and will climb as Lopez and Bolton fight it out for P2 just ahead of Casey Tucker, who's made the most of being able to stay out and catch the caution at the right time. He's only fallen to 4th after we went back green flag racing. But now that we are at halfway, it is time for our midway race break, which is brought to you by iRacing, the world's premier online racing game. iRacing puts you in the driver's seat to experience today's newest form of competitive motorsport. Virtual racing, all from your home PC. Race virtually in Australian supercars, IndyCar, IMSA, NASCAR, the world of outlaws, and more. Derek Bordeaux is your race leader after coming down twice and pitting and then pitting again and taking advantage of the fresh Goodyear Eagles to stretch out his lead now 1.8 seconds over Jordy Lopez Jr. Justin Bolton holds the 3rd spot as it stands. 4th belongs to Casey Tucker. Colin Keister and Tucker Minter are fighting for that 5th spot side by side. So those two 5th and 6th with Cody Bias in 7th. 8th belongs to Daniel Roper. 9th currently to Boyd Hogan. Seth DeMerchant that will clear him and go from 10th to 9th on the outside of it. Pizzoco.
And continuing on through the running order here, Jordy Lopez Jr., we talk about how he's been in the battle. We take a look at this as it continues on track. You get the likes of Donovan Strauss, right? This is all that mid-pack that just won't break up on each other, trying to get around the likes of DeMerchant and others who are falling back. Parker Retzlaff has balanced it out. He'll go to the outside here and try to make some moves as he tries to not fall, but It's kind of the danger zone, guys. Logan Kress in the number 13 spot, along with Michael Finlayson in 14th. And in Hocevar sits 15th, kind of midway through your running order here. Briar LaPrade, haven't talked much about him. He's up a pretty good number, up 8. So is Alex McCollum. Talking about former drivers at the top level, also +8 to 17th. But then some drivers who have gone the wrong direction. Brad Mahar has trickled down to 18th spot. So has, as the shuffle up for the running positions goes, Braden Abulos, guys, top 10 in qualifying, down in 19th, just ahead of Connor Horn, who's P20.
One of those drivers actually gaining, currently in 21st. Justin Levine trying to gain some more spots up from where he started in 30th. Dylan Alt down a bit. Brian Mercurio also going the wrong way in the 19, and those 41 Ford F-150 blue car. Trayton Lapsevich down in 24th. Devin Curl 25th. Larry Pace sits in 26th. Then we get to the cars off over one lap down. Blake Neer, Kevin King, Justin Lazenby, and Drew Farinage going to round out your top 30 with Tyler Severa, Matt Danson, Anthony Burrows, Jarrett Liebert having a lot of issues tonight. They round out your full 34-car field currently on the track here at the virtual Atlanta Motor Speedway.
And that concludes tonight's iRacing Midway Race Break. With over 170,000 drivers on the service and over 90 laser scan tracks and cars to choose from, iRacing is your portal to the racing world. You can get on track today at iRacing.com. A little bit of a lighter build in terms of content that we just had, Jeff McConey, but 2 new additions to the field in particular. Hockenheimring, one of the famed road courses in all the world, in Baden-Württemberg in Germany, on the service now for the first time. And we have a McLaren GT4 to add to the roster of cars that go into the IMSA Michelin Pilot Challenge, as we've got cars that are coming down on pit road, or trucks rather, as Derek Bordeaux will lead a group from the lead, and he's got some company too. Bordeaux is down pit road in the old Ford truck, as is Jordy Lopez, Colin Keister, Tucker Minter, and Brad Mahar.
Yeah, we can touch on those new updates and physics updates to the sim as well, but this is a very interesting call here from Derek Bordeaux. And see, I would have, if it were me, I would have stayed out those couple extra laps. You had the fresher tires, you had that 2-second advantage, but I guess this is a defensive move. He's now setting himself back on the same strategy as everyone else. He's still going to have that 2-second advantage. He's still going to be just as quick and just as far ahead. So we'll see. This was the conservative call here, and on lap 91, a little over halfway through the race, I think that's the smart one. Now, if you're everyone else, time to hit pit road. You need to get down as soon as you can. We've seen how bad the fall off is here. We've seen the value of tires. If I'm a driver that's still out on track and I've got a crew chief up on the box, I'm screaming into his ear that I need to get to pit road now.
And Casey Tucker will heed your advice, Jeff McConey. He comes down along with Donovan Strauss. Looks like we'll see a few others make their way towards pit road as they come down and get down to the very, very slow sort of 45 miles an hour. Alex McCollum is in. Looks like Carson Hocevar in as well. It leaves us with 9 trucks yet to make their next pit stop. Seth the Merchant, rather, the leader of this group that may well come in this time or may hang out for a bit. We'll see if Parker Retzlaff will give DeMerchant some breathing room, and DeMerchant's going to stay out. And you see the difference there. Look at Jordy Lopez Jr. blow past Seth the Merchant like he was standing still. You want a visual on how much new tires matter here at Atlanta? Right there. Clip that last 15 seconds and just replay that. It tells you all you need to know.
There's 2 seconds of difference compared to DeMerchant and Lopez, a 33.2 and a 31.2. And this is kind of an interesting way for the strategy to play out. More drivers on the radio. Hogan says that he's going to be down pit road from second this time through. Retzlaff on the radio as well. Just came in the last time. The fact that, Jeff, we're in a position where they could go much longer than they are right now, right? Some 40 some odd laps into the run. But it's just too long a run, not by a ton, but just too far to be able to make this on a one-stopper to the end, which is why you can have some drivers go a little bit earlier because they kind of got that built-in leeway here, just the way that first yellow flew and the way that, of course, how far you can go on a fuel run here.
Right, the limiting factor for these guys tonight isn't the fuel, it's the tires. So they've been going every about 45 laps, they've been bringing it down pit road, and that's by design. They're breaking the race apart into equal sections, assuming no cautions, into 42 lap sections. So now you're going to see pretty much right here, you look at it, and we're at about 45, 44 laps to go left in the race. Yeah, I think we're going to see these guys come in right about lap 125, 130 or so, and mark that down. If it stays green, I'm expecting really pit stops to start around lap 125 and end by lap 135. That's my prediction, but you see these guys that are still out here, Seth the Merchant, Devin Curl, James Curl, and those two guys they're the ones in the danger zone now. They've made their bed. It's time for them to lay in it. Derek Bordeaux still has 2 seconds over Jordi Lopez, so that was the right call there to come down and pit. It was the safe call, but it was the right call in this scenario.
I think if you have the speed, then yes, you certainly don't have anything to lose. The intriguing one is to see DeMerchant stay out as long as he has. As Devin Curl will come down pit road. So DeMerchant, Larry Pace, and Blake Neer are the 3 that have yet to come down pit road. But DeMerchant finally is going to bring his Logitech Gialtis esports machine down to pit road, and the VRS-sponsored Chevrolet Silverado will make the pit stop after a 50-plus lap green flag run. And once he comes back off pit road, the lead will cycle back around to Derek Bordeaux, who will be clear of Jordi Lopez by about the same margin that he had before we came down for green flag pit stops. The gap between Bordeaux and Lopez about 1.8 seconds, just as it was a few laps ago.
Now, take a look. Jordi Lopez is gaining a little bit on Derek Bordeaux. That last lap, he was about 0.03 off, but he's been gaining, steadily gaining. It went from about 2.2 seconds down to 2 seconds, now down to 1.8, so it might have just been traffic that Derek Bordeaux was in, but Jordi Lopez might have something here. Every time they pit, they get a chance to adjust on the cars and make a little bit of an improvement. Might be something that Jordi Lopez found here to make a good adjustment.
So how good is Jordi Lopez on the long green flag run? If you remember a year ago, and we talked about this in the broadcast last week at Las Vegas, but Jordi Lopez won at Daytona and then at Homestead, Miami, 2 of the first 3 races in this series in the top split 1 year ago. And it looked for all the world at the end of March like he was a lock to make the Contender Series, and then after that it all sort of fell apart for him. So now here's Lopez back. He had a decent amount of speed at Las Vegas last week, and then the clip the fence, didn't quite have the run that he would have wanted, but this is the Jordi Lopez that I think we expected to be competitive, Evan. This is the Jordi Lopez that has the talent to make it to the Contender Series at least, and now we are starting to see him flex his muscle. You've got a good truck like this on a long green flag run. If you can hang it here in Atlanta and make it work for the next 30, 40 laps, it says a lot about your ability. I think it also says a lot about what we can expect from these drivers, and maybe your case in particular, over the course of this eNASCAR Road to Pro qualifying iRacing Series season.
Well, it goes to show you that a bad start doesn't mean that your season is done, and a good start doesn't mean you're locked in, right? Of course, we talk about so much how this format has changed. It had been tweaked over the last year, and how you got to go through multiple rounds to get into this thing. That means that you can have a strong start. You can feel good, but you do have to perform all season long. Yes, strong runs early in the year, a good indication of who's going to be there at the end, but it is not the only one. As we run on board there with Donovan Strauss, he'll squeeze through to the inside on the bottom of Dan Roper, trying to save some fuel from position number 8. Only been out there for about 10 laps, but he is keeping that in mind.
So there goes Strauss up to P7, and it does sound like, just listening to him on corner entry, that he might be clutching and coasting just to save that little extra bit of fuel, Jeff McConaughey. So maybe some strategy there. I'd be curious to see what you think Strauss is trying to do. And then also of note, Trayton Lapsevich is disconnected after a penalty on pit road during that last cycle of pit stops. He's currently scored in the 31st position now. It looks like that's where Lapsevich is going to finish this evening. But Jeff, the strategy here with Donovan Strauss, what do you think the play is if he's trying to save fuel now?
I don't think he's aggressively saving too much fuel. If he's putting the clutch in, it's not doing too much, but it can help the truck through the center. You're carrying more speed, so if you've got a really loose truck, sometimes even just putting the clutch in a little bit will help. It's not extreme, dire fuel saving, need to make it to the end, last ditch effort out of him. I think he's more playing around and seeing what he can find. He might be trying to push it here. Long pit this time so he has fresh tires at the end, but that might not be the best strategy here. When you're 2 seconds a lap off the pace, you want to pit as soon as the first person does. One person short pits, everyone else has to play that game or their hand is forced. It would be the second race in a row where we saw that staying out longer and forcing it a long pit stop on yourself doesn't help. Granted, I said the same thing earlier on, and Boyd Hogan and his trio of cars that were out there with him ended up benefiting from it. So you're banking on a caution at that point. If I'm a gambling person, I'm not going to put all my money on a caution in this series. We've had one so far this race, and it's been very clean ever since. I think the right call here is maybe save some fuel and see what you can do, but short pit here. If someone else short pits, then you've got to come in with them.
It's an interesting point that maybe it's more of a handling thing, and then to the point that you just made, really saving on this run to be able to maybe sprint on that final run. Does it really do you any good if you give up that time and that, maybe 2, 3, 4 lap window in between when you normally would pit and when you decide to pit if you stay out a little bit? You certainly have fresher tires, but you also have to make up the gap that you gave up by staying out the few extra laps as well. So it could end up being a wash at the end of the day, and maybe, just maybe, the trick for Strauss is to try and get that car to handle better through the center of the corner, like you said, or truck. As Derek Bordeaux still in control of this race. We haven't forgotten about the 04 truck, but we'll take a look at the battle here with Carson Hocevar. Looks like Cody Bias is there. This is 17th, 18th, 19th, and 20th. You've got, looks like Brian Mercurio here and Seth DeMerchant as well, trying to rally back after staying out a little bit longer. If you are Donovan Strauss, this is the driver you're watching, because what he is doing now should mirror exactly what you may be going for if you are trying to stay out long on this green flag run.
And this battle just starting to heat up. You can see the 42 going to the outside line. That is Carson Hocevar trying to get by Brian Mercurio, and he does, powering around the outside line. Now DeMerchant leads this pack ahead of Bias, Hocevar, and Mercurio. And peeking around a little bit further back is Connor Horn. He's pretty far back from this group, as DeMerchant going to start to pull away from this group as well. He's finding some speed in that Logitech EG Altus Esports number 57. Now pulling away from that group, getting free of some traffic as they make their way through 3.
So this is the one we'll have to watch. DeMerchant, I think, as we slide a little bit further up. This is Logan Kress, Michael Finlayson, Parker Retzlaff, and Alex McCollum, who last time by was one of the fastest trucks on track, running the High Performance Motorsports Amuka Esports colors and working his way through the field up to P9 after starting 25th. And sort of typical of some of these drivers in the back half of the top 10. You look at it now, Logan Kress has maintained the track position well after starting dead last in this field, 34th. Daniel Rober started in 26th. He's up to 8th. Casey Tucker, 28th to 6th. So a little bit of track position, a little bit of strategy. There's enough room here to where you can play pit road the right way and gain some spots and have it work out for you. And I think especially in Kress's case, Kress certainly did not have the track position to start, but staying out on that first yellow flag and being able to come in after everybody else pitted really has changed the complexion of his race significantly.
It sounds a lot like what we were talking about on Tuesday night, right? With the eNASCAR Coca-Cola iRacing Series race here. When you have long green flag runs and these drivers can take a little bit into their own hands, work around different spots of the racetrack to find the grip later into the run, to have a little bit of leeway on what the pit strategy is, you could work your way through the field. You mentioned some of those drivers, Tucker and others. Some of them, remember that group of 3, had the benefit of catching that early yellow, but a lot of them have just driven through the field, right? You got the top 5 on track right now, all started inside of the top 10, and then the next driver in running order who started top 10s down in 16th. So it is a bunch of big movers. Tucker plus 22, so was Logan Kress. So a lot of drivers, like we saw on Tuesday, taking advantage of all this green flag action. You throw a cycle of green flag pit stops, maybe 2 consecutively as we get to 55 laps to go in this race, and it's wide open for somebody who's got a good race truck to make some moves.
I think it also underscores, Josh Lee, that while we do have drivers who have shown an ability to drive through the field, it also underlines just how good the top 5 have been, because Bordeaux, Lopez, Keister, Bolton, Minter, we called their names pretty much all night. Somewhere in the top 5, top 10. They really haven't left it since we dropped the first green flag.
And those are the drivers that we really knew at the beginning of the race were going to be quick, and they're showing their speed out here. The question I'm wondering now as we near the final stint of this race, they still have one more pit stop to go for tires. Then we're expecting a lot of drivers to go all the way to lap number 167 after that. But what I'm wondering is, how are these drivers going to catch the car in front under green flag conditions? Like Jeff was saying, I'm not really expecting another caution in this race until that checkered flag falls. So the drivers, if they're going to want to close in those gaps, make those passes, they got to find the line that works for them, works for their setup, to where they're able to catch the car in front. Jordi Lopez Jr. has been barely etching away at that lead from Derek Bordeaux. It stretched out to about 1.9 seconds, and in about 15 laps or so, it's now down to around 1.7. So he is gaining slightly on your leader. Still a long way to go for Lopez, though. But Keister, Bolton, Minter, they need to start trying to etch away at their gaps as well. Those three are fairly close together, but Bolton's still trying to struggle his way past Keister, and Lopez is a long way to go on Bordeaux. They got to find that secret, and they need to find it fast. Time's running out for each of the drivers in this race.
And don't look now, but it is beginning to close up on us. The last 40 laps of this race are only about 10 laps away and change. So that sort of last stint, we've seen these stints tonight be about 40 laps or so. So we're not totally removed from another one. And if someone wants to go really crazy here, Jeff McConaughey, give it maybe, 6-7 laps, you could see somebody come in and pit again and try and run this on a full run, at least in terms of what we see tonight, the rest of the way on tires, and maybe make a 45, 46, 47 lap stint to the finish.
It's definitely possible. So the last stops that we saw were on lap 91 is what kicked off the cycle. And at that point, there were about 75 or so laps left in the race. Yeah, 76 laps left in the race. So you divide that in half, 38 laps. You can expect to see him come in about lap 129. I'd put the window at 125 to 135. So that falls right in the center of it. What you want to do is just split this last bit in half. You don't need to go the full 40, and you don't want to come in too early either. You split it right in half, right at 38 laps, and that will be perfect. So I think lap 125 to 135 is the goal, but I think probably, to be more specific, I'm putting my money on lap 129. That's where we see the guys come in.
Do you think there's any advantage to maybe coming in at the early, especially if you're towards the back of the field, and if we don't get another yellow flag, do you see an advantage by trying to short pit and coming in maybe, lap 123, 124, or do you lose too much time on the racetrack with the extra laps that you have to run to make that strategy worthwhile?
Normally, I would say yes, but not this time, because you're splitting the last of it in half. So right now, what they're trying to do is make sure everything is balanced and find that perfect middle ground. So if you short pit, you're going to pay for that on the second one. If you long pit, you're going to pay for it on the first half of it. So I think pitting right in the middle, that would be my call. That's the safe call. If I'm Derek Bordeaux, I'm calling this race as safely as I possibly can. He's got the speed. He's got the gap out front. He knows what he's doing. So play it safe. Don't do anything crazy. Because if you go for that one extra tiny bit and you end up throwing away that 2-second lead, you're going to be kicking yourself for the next 2 weeks, and that's not going to be a fun time.
Really isn't, as we see Derek Bordeaux still in front. Meanwhile, oh, big moment there. That was Seth DeMerchant trying to get to the inside of Michael Finlayson. And the 36 machine trapped up top as DeMerchant is still trying to climb through the field. He's up into the top 10 after pitting from the lead. But again, he stayed out late. So the one good thing I think for DeMerchant is that even though he stayed out a little bit later than everybody else, he has the time to make this back up and get back on cycle. And it's not like he's going to spend the rest of this race trying to fight through a strategy in which, maybe he came down a little bit too early or a little bit too late.
And something tells me this might be the pit cycle where we see some more issues, right? I mean, pit cycles both times that at under green have been a little bit dicey. We saw an incident on the last pit cycle just a little bit ago where Lapsevich ended up off and into the grass, clipped the commitment cone, was penalized, and ended up parking it. Of course, we saw the actual incident that led to the first yellow on the first green flag cycle. So far tonight, something has happened every single time. We talk about all the time that you could make up on pit strategy. How about just getting in and out of pit road? These race leaders know that that this cycle of pit stops coming up, if we get to the green flag stops, could be the most likely chance that that's where an incident comes from if we see one. So your leaders might want to be a little bit safe. They might take it easy. The guys on the back foot may push it a little bit more, right? Try to make up some time. So those cars outside of the top 10 could stand to gain a bit if they could be aggressive, and the leaders maybe are a little bit more conservative.
Riding on board with Cody Bias, who sits in the 18th position, and Bias, just a sort of mid-pack race. This truck looks like it had some speed a little bit earlier on, but looks like it just hasn't really fallen his way, Josh Lee, through the middle of this event. And might need a strong final stint in order to get back up to the front.
Yeah, he's one of those drivers who pitted under those green flag stops. His tires are a good bit old, and it looks like his truck just might have gone sour throughout this run. Maybe pushed the tires a little bit too much, burned them off a little bit too quickly. He's able to get at least one spot over Brandon Bolos in the 01. So we'll grab that spot away, put him up to 17th, but down a long way in this run, and I think that's definitely going to be something with the tires. He might have burned off that right front more than he was planning to throughout the remainder of this run, but he's running the bottom of the racetrack now, trying to regain some spots, and I bet he's hoping for either a caution or a pit stop here very soon to try and work his way back up the field in the 20.
Speaking of pit stops, we are maybe 5 laps away from Jeff McConey's golden number of lap 129, and you wonder whether or not Bordeaux is going to come, whether or not Lopez is going to come. I think the one thing to note with regards to the leaders is that Bordeaux started this run about 1.7, 1.8 seconds clear of Lopez. He stretched it out to 2.5. So we're seeing the benefits of clean air and the benefits of being the race leader right in the hands of the 04. He's tacked on just about another second to his race lead, and Bordeaux is running off the front of this race.
Taking a look back at Bias there, I'm looking at his lap times compared to everyone else. It looks like it might have just been a bad adjustment there on the pit stop. He's not able to keep up pace with everybody else, or it was no pit stop or no adjustment on the pit stop at all. He didn't take into account the changing track and everything else. It's just as much a game of changing the truck as it is not changing it. Sometimes you want nothing at all adjusted. You don't touch anything, and that can hurt you. But at the same time, you fix something too much or you adjust something too much, and the whole thing just goes away. He was running top 10. Now he's fallen back a little bit further. But up towards the front here, I think we're going to see pit stops here very soon.
I just want to jump in and mention it's not the pit cycle strategy, right? Because he did what we think is the right answer to double up on the pit stops earlier, James. He did that. So everybody else who did that's been going forwards. Bias kind of the outlier in that group.
Right, and Bias was one of the ones who stayed out on the old tires and has dropped. And I think it also speaks to just how tough it is to get yourself out of the mid-pack if you get stuck in there, Josh Lee. That's the other point that I think you sort of read from the way Bias's race has played out.
Yeah, and just going on top of that bad adjustment, it's something that you really can't change once you're on the racetrack. For tire wear, you can start backing it up, start to lessen the amount of tire wear that you're getting. A bad adjustment you have to deal with until the next time you come down pit road. The only thing these drivers can adjust from inside the cockpit off of pit road is brake bias. Anything else they need to adjust on pit road. So a bad adjustment basically curses you for around 45 laps as leaders coming down pit road. First takers is Colin Keister locking it up, trying to get it slowed down to avoid a pit penalty. Bolton, Minter, and more all coming down. Looks like Jordi Lopez Jr. also joining this group. Seth DeMerchant in the 57 also in. He's not going to have a late pit stop in this stint.
So everybody behind Derek Bordeaux responding and trying to come down early to get Bordeaux in. And I don't think it's going to be any question you're going to see the 04 come down this time. So he is in on, guess what, Jeff McConey, lap 129.
Lap 129. We got it.
The crystal ball is all in one, West Lafayette, I see.
It is. It's working great here. It's not a crystal ball. At the end of the day, it's mathematics, statistic, probability, and that's what it all comes down to. Racing is a game of numbers just as much as it is a game of talent. So lap 129, split it in half, and he's going to go out there, still have a good advantage over everyone else. I think that was a really smart call there.
So TLDR science, which is why we have you here, so I can handle the wordsmithing, which is definitely more where my brain tends to play out well. As Boyd Hogan is going to come down pit road, looks like we're going to have a few more, and a lot of drivers. Actually, Boyd Hogan missed, or somebody missed pit road.
Mike Fenlinson missed pit road.
Mike Finlayson, yeah, it was one of the black trucks. I couldn't tell which one though, but Finlayson misses pit road, so that'll be disastrous for his run. If we don't get a yellow flag, I think that almost locks him into a somewhere around 15th, 20th finish at best. As wait to see when McCollum, LaPrade, Mahar, Finlayson, Mercurio, and Hocevar come down. Those are the final 6 of our top runners who are yet to make what should be their last pit stop.
Well, interesting the way he tried to enter pit road there, and you saw it on the replay. There's a bit of a transition on the apron, right? It doesn't go all the way from the banking to the flat. You'll see a seam down in there on the apron above where all those drivers are running. Got a little bit of banking on the apron, and then it goes completely flat. And some drivers, the issue they've been having off of 4 is they've been slowing down on the banking, going down across 1 seam on the brakes, and then crossing down on 2, and it's just been upsetting a lot of the trucks. Nobody should be shocked that we're locking up tires and pushing it to the 50-mile-an-hour speed limit, but we should be surprised when these drivers are getting a little bit too sideways. He wanted to avoid that, tried to make a little bit of a sharper turn late, just did not work for him.
Didn't stick for Finlayson. We'll see where he comes out of all of this. What we can tell you, though, is that Derek Bordeaux is still clear of everybody else of the drivers who've already come down pit road. He's ahead of Colin Keister by 1.3 seconds. And maybe a note here, I didn't see anything in particular, Josh Lee, but looks like Jordi Lopez struggled on pit road. He's back down to 8th in real time, which would put him 3rd once or 5th rather, I guess, once our 3 drivers who have yet to come down cycle through.
Just looking at him going through pit lane, I didn't see anything in the pit lane particularly happen. So very interesting on why Jordi Lopez fell down the order so much, but running in 8th, he still has a chance to work his way back up through the field. The only thing I'm seeing, it looked like he made a last-minute effort to knock his way into the pit lane, but other than that, everything looks picture perfect on and off of pit lane. He kept up with the cars in front. It just looks like when he got on the racetrack, he started falling like a rock.
All eyes on Derek Bordeaux to see how soon he can get back to the front as you look at some more battles here a little bit further back in the field and look at some of the great action. This is Blake Neer and Cody Bias Blake Neer and looks like the lap machine, or actually no, the leader, Brad Mahar, who is yet to come down pit road for service, but looks like he may be making his stop in a few laps. Not this time, though. He's going to try and stretch it. So I have to believe Jeff Laconi. This is Mahar, Mercurio, and Hocevar trying to wait it out 10 laps and see if they can get a yellow.
We are watching in real time someone lay in the bed that they've made. I think that the right call was to pit right and split it in half. So now you're staying out, you're banking on that caution, but it was a dangerous game, and it's getting to the point now where it's going to come back to bite them if they don't get a caution here soon. They need something to fall their way. It was a gamble that they took, but I don't know if it's going to work out for them here.
It's a gamble, but if you're running a little bit further back, Evan, it's one that I don't necessarily mind taking, because if you don't play this, you clearly have no shot to win with the way the trucks have been running. And Mahar, Hocevar, and Mercurio have been mid-pack for most of this race, so you at least give yourself a chance, and maybe you pay for it if it doesn't give you a yellow late in this race. But as it stands, to some degree, if you want to try to go for the win, why not try and make it happen this way?
Yeah, I mean, they were stagnant. They weren't way back, but, Brad Mahar was running in 16th position. Hocevar was 20th, and Mercurio was in the middle of the 19th. So it wasn't great nights for them, but we've already seen this play work once tonight, right? Early in the race, first cycle of pit stops. A caution helped out 3 drivers. Well, they hope to be the second trio of drivers who can benefit. And we've already said pit cycles are the most often time, or maybe the most frequent time, rather, that you could see an incident. Why not? Stay out, try to get yourself some points as opposed to just riding around where you have been all night. Don't hate the calling, and we talked about how they've got fuel to stretch it if they want, so it's not like throwing your race away for a 6-lap window. They've got a dozen or so laps that they can hope for the yellow flag to come out here. They are just going to be eating away at those tires. They feel like with only 20 some odd trucks on the lead lap right now, the gamble's not that big, and it's already worked out once, so they're hoping that lightning strikes twice.
as we come towards the end of tonight's race. If you're new to Podium Esports and want to see more of the best content in sim racing, don't forget to hit the follow button down on the lower right-hand corner of your screen. And if you're interested in seeing your brand or business on the broadcast, send an email to admin@podiumesports.com. There's a plan for every budget, and custom tailored solutions can be developed to suit your needs best. For more information, send that email and head on over to podiumesports.com to see more of what we have to offer, as Mahar will finally come down pit road, and that leaves Hocevar and Mercurio as the last two drivers standing who have yet to make their final pit stops. And if this goes green, it should cycle back through to Derek Bordeaux, who should end up in the race lead.
Did you see what happened right there? That little bit of a wiggle, that truck sliding backwards, that was Brad Mahar missing the box. That's the single worst time you could possibly miss your pit stall. That's going to really come back to bite him, and that threw an already dangerous strategy right out the window. He slid through just an inch too far and had to back it up.
So Mahar currently scored in 20th. It looks like that's where he should cycle back out of the racetrack, maybe a little bit further back, depending on what kind of run Dylan Alt and Connor Horn get on the back straightaway. But all eyes on Hocevar, as Mercurio now has been passed by Bordeaux in real time before he's even made his stop. So not much that Mercurio, I think, can do. He's just going to get out of the way, and looks like Hocevar is going to come down pit road now, and that means that Derek Bordeaux is back in control of this race with 26 laps to go.
Not really surprised at all. Bordeaux still in control of the race. He's been in control really since that second stint. He has had that 01 machine so quick all day long, and is going to try and keep that up. Mahar down the inside, going to grab his lap back. But Bordeaux still dominating in that 04 Duval created Toyota Tundra. Second place now as Mercurio comes down into pit lane. Going to go to Colin Keister for Space Station Gaming. Coming into this race, he was feeling pretty confident. Said on Twitter he thinks he has a rocket ship, which is fitting considering he is driving for Space Station Gaming. So we'll see what he can do in this final stint. About 2 seconds separating the leaders so far. Bolton sitting back about 3.5 seconds back from your leader as he tries to get around the lapped vehicle ahead of him. Minter sitting roughly 5 seconds back from your leader, and Jordy Lopez Jr. working his way around Casey Tucker to etch his way into the top 5. He's still going to battle with Casey Tucker coming off of 4, but they're about 5.5 seconds back from your leader.
Colin Keister would rise up to second in points, but for lack of better terms, and with all puns intended, it's been quite the launch for his 2021 eNASCAR Road to Pro qualifying iRacing Series campaign. Great run at Las Vegas 2 weeks ago, and if this stays green flag the rest of the way, should be another good finish for Keister as we look at the battles a little bit further back on the racetrack, right around Connor Horn and company. You've got some good fights, and you've got this fight as well, as these drivers come down the front straightaway and work themselves out of a knot here. This is Casey Tucker, Jordy Lopez Jr., Carson Hocevar on the lap machine, and then Donovan Strauss. So call it 5th, 6th, and 7th in 4th position.
They're going to try and power around that car on the outside. Sorry, Jeff.
No, all good, all good. Taking a look at the times, I'm a big fan of the math here and everything else. Coming to the line, that last lap is a 32.719 for Derek Bordeaux, a 7.95 for Colin Keister. He's been running about 1/10 to 2/10 off per lap from Derek Bordeaux. He's not just maintaining this lead, he is still pulling away from the field. Every single time he stopped, he's gotten quicker and quicker and quicker. This truck was either built for the end, or they have been nailing these pit stop adjustments. Derek Bordeaux has been quicker every single time, and he's a 10th up on second place.
Hasn't been too much change in the track temp, but it has gone up a little bit, so I imagine you probably have something to say there when you look at the adjustments they've made on that 04 truck and the way it's coming through. But I think the bigger story is the hunger to get back to the Coke Series, because the last time Derek Bordeaux was in the Coke Series, Evan, it was not the Coke Series, and the prize pool was not as big as it is today. And this series has evolved significantly just within the last year or two, between landing on television with NBCSN for the finale back in 19, and then everything that we saw as the Coke Series carried the banner in the opening stint of the pandemic for NASCAR and eNASCAR in 2020. It seems like it's grown exponentially, and for drivers who were in and then fell out, I think there's more incentive to race your way back in now than there ever has been in the 11, now 12-year history of the Coke Series.
And tougher as well than it's ever been, right? I mean, it's a point that we always go back to, that the drivers that have been at this level for so long and kind of made up the majority of the field 3-4 years ago, those were drivers who have been sim racing for so long, even started before there was such thing as a Coke Series, right? Even well before we're talking about $300,000 on the line. But now you have a lot of names in this, the young talent as well, right? I mean, a lot of drivers, in high school or in college age that are trying to race up to the ranks, they get into sim racing, starting maybe even on iRacing, as opposed to a lot of the vets that started on other services. This is their goal, right? It is a hobby, yes, but they have a plan, and that's why it is that much more difficult if you're somebody who wants to get back in it to compete, because the question is, are you hungrier than all those new faces? And oftentimes it's hard to keep that level up year after year after year, and it's why I'll say it. I think the Coke Series ladder the best of the World Championships on iRacing, with how hard it is to stay with the relegation.
Certainly one of the most competitive, I think, if not the most competitive, as we close in on 15 laps to go. And you're right, so much that has increased across the board with not just the Coke Series, but these qualifying series and all the series in the ladder. Again, I don't want to imagine the thought of having to compete in a 7,000 strength of field iRating event like this, but that is top split. And there are people here where you could look at least, 10, 12, maybe 13 of these drivers, Jeff McConaughey, and they have higher iRatings than some of the drivers that are in the Coke Series. That's how competitive this series has become.
It is incredibly competitive out here. It is hard to put into words just how strong this field is. This is probably the most competitive series, not just in Road to Pro or Coke Series history, but probably in iRacing history. It's easily the best group of asphalt oval drivers ever assembled that's all competing here. And when you jump into a race, the average iRacer has about, let's say 1,1600 iRating. And on a good race, you can gain about 80. On a bad race, you can lose 80 to 100 even. So it's a lot harder to gain iRating than it is to lose it. And for these guys to be up there at 6, 7, 8,000 is just unfathomable how high of a number that is and how long it takes to get there and the amount of talent and skill required to get up there. So this is easily the best group of asphalt oval racers ever assembled for the Road to Pro Series. Arguably, once we see who makes it into the Coke Series, it's going to almost certainly be the most competitive Coke Series ever, and it seems like that's a trend that gets set every single year. But Evan, this is your area of expertise.
Well, we talked a little bit about this as well back in Vegas, right? The fact that we talk about these kind of outrageously high iRatings and how they're only going to continue to go up, right? I mean, the standard to get into a top split at about 7,000 this year, probably not going to be enough in 3-4 years time, right? So that goes back to the point that I was making just about that commitment. It really is a grind. We talked earlier about stuff that people tuning into the broadcast like this don't see, the teams, right? The crew chiefs and the spotters, but they don't also see the hours and hours of practice and all of that goes in. It is tough to treat something, in many cases, when you're with some of these bigger teams that have needed to put in so much time as a job, while also it's still being fun and being a hobby. So that's why this is the most competitive, James, I'll say it definitively, of the iRacing World Championships, and it's going to be a talking point for years and years to come, and that is why eNASCAR continues to grow, is because I think that translates well, and people can see just how real these guys take it and how much is on the line.
And we also have to factor in the effects of the pandemic and the Pro Invitational Series, too, that completely open the world's eyes to what we can see in this sim week by week by week. And I think a lot of us in the community had known for a while the power of iRacing, but it took an event like that to make everybody realize that there really is something here to be learned, and that there are some folks who can follow in the steps Will Byron's the poster child, but you look a little bit further down the ladder, and there are so many people who have been involved in the sim who have progressed into real-world NASCAR rides. Anthony Alfredo, good friend of ours at Podium Esports and a driver in the NASCAR Cup Series for Front Row Motorsports, and also a co-owner of Lockdown Racing, who's got some trucks in tonight's field. He falls into that camp. You look a little bit further back down the ladder, Nick Sanchez and Raja Karuth, who have got plenty of experience, and Raja in particular got his start in the sim proper. Was based in urban Washington, D.C., and didn't really have a local short track near him. So instead of buying a local short track car, his parents got together and they worked out some money and got him a rig. And then all of a sudden, Raja is able to learn his craft, hone his craft, perform in the official series here on iRacing. And now he's part of NASCAR's Driver Diversity program and is making some starts in the ARCA Menard Series East. So it really is possible to translate your runs here at iRacing into real-life opportunities, which is not something I think we've ever been able to say. It speaks to just how much this program has developed and just how wild things have become over the last 12 years. In the final 10 laps of this race, we've got a good battle here between Alex McCollum and Brian LaPrade, but we'll take a moment to remind you of some of the events coming up in the world of Podium Esports and iRacing over the course of the next week, so you all won't miss any of the action, because if you like what you see here, plenty more to come your way. Tomorrow night, it's the PCA Sim Racing Zone Group Challenge from Road America. We'll go racing in the Porsche 911 GT3 Cup cars at the famed road course in Wisconsin. And you can see the action on twitch.tv/Podium2, Podium Esports Facebook and YouTube pages, as well as the PCA Sim Racing YouTube channel. We're back here on the main Podium Esports Twitch channel on Sunday night, 9:15 p.m. Eastern for round 10 of the MPI Cup Series from Dover International Speedway. And then the big one this week, Monday Night Racing, presented by Tough Coat Flooring, season finale from Atlanta Motor Speedway. We'll be live at a special time of 7:30 p.m. Eastern for pre-race. And on the call for that race will be Fox Sports' Adam Alexander, Larry McReynolds, and Darrell Waltrip to crown a champion out of the final 4 drivers who have progressed through the playoffs. You will want to tune in and not want to miss that race, which will take place with these trucks right here at Atlanta Motor Speedway. So a potential preview of the action that you could be seeing on Monday night. Next Wednesday, it's the Dirt Sprint Car Championship Series from Williams Grove alongside the eNASCAR Pro Invitational Series debut. That on the Twitch channel, Podium 2 at 9 p.m. Eastern. Next Saturday, it's the MSRA Premier Series from the dirt track at Bristol Motor Speedway, another one of the new additions that came in the most recent build of iRacing. You'll see that broadcast at 8 p.m. March 27th on twitch.tv/Podium2, and then the Podium Facebook and YouTube pages as well. And then our next race is for the Coke Series Auto Club on March 30th, 8:30 p.m. Eastern Time. You'll see a pre-race for that on iRacing's channels, and then we're back here for the third round of eNASCAR Road to Pro qualifying iRacing Series from Richmond Raceway, April 8th at 9 p.m. Eastern Time. Haven't missed much at the front, though. Derek Bordeaux has walked away from the field. It is a 3.1 second lead, and although there are some good battles a little bit further back in the field, Tucker Minter, Casey Tucker, Donovan Strauss in a good fight of their own, Seth DeMerchant, Jordy Lopez, Parker Retzlaff. Not too much to talk about proper until you get to maybe Alex McCollum, Brian LaPrade, 12th and 13th with lap traffic just behind them, Devin Curl. But those two probably the closest battle on track as we wind down this race. 5 laps to go from Atlanta Motor Speedway, and I think McCollum will take a 12th and LaPrade will take a 13th. Didn't have the greatest of runs at Las Vegas, but this is the kind of consistency you need to show if you at least want to give yourself a chance to make the Contender Series in the fall.
5 laps to go in this race. Just getting word in our Twitch chat from Dylan Duvall that they've lost the handling on Justin Bolton's number 23 Busch Light Ford F-150. He's trying to hang on now. He's currently sitting in third, but Tucker Minter breathing down his neck about 1.2 seconds back. Can he hold on? Just 4 more laps to go, trying to get that top 3, that podium for Bolton. It's going to be huge for him as he is currently not sitting in the top 10 of the points, and he's not sitting in the top 5 for that either. So Bolton looking for a good finish here, kickstart himself in the points to be above that top 70 when round 1 is concluded. 3 to go now, and Derek Bordeaux continues to show his strength in the 04, leads the way. Colin Keister now 3.2 seconds back. Absolutely nothing he can do at this point. He's praying for a yellow flag or a huge mistake from Bordeaux, but the 04 Duval Creative Toyota Tundra has been perfect all night. He's gonna grab 2 laps to go, try and nurse the thing home for a win here at the Virtual Atlanta.
Derek Bordeaux absolutely smashing it tonight, Jeff McCody, no doubt about it.
He absolutely has been doing a fantastic job tonight. Looking back to Justin Bolton, that he has the speed here. He's still trending to be in front, to come home third here, as long as he doesn't make a mistake, doesn't hit the wall or anything like that. Tucker Minter is about a 10th quicker or so, maybe half a 10th quicker behind him. The math says he'll be fine. He's not even going to get to his back bumper. So it's looking like the top 3 is going to be Derek Bordeaux by a wide margin, Colin Keister, and then Justin Bolton. But white flag is in the air.
And it was all about the pit strategy for Derek Bordeaux. You called it early, Jeff McConey. He came in on that first yellow and got another set of tires after we had that short stint. He ran about 5 laps and then came back in. You said it was the call of the race. If you figured we weren't going to get any yellow flags later on, it was the right move. And indeed, Bordeaux has shown why it was, as Derek Bordeaux comes out of turn number 4 and crosses the stripe to win the second race of the eNASCAR Road to Pro Qualifying iRacing Series for 2021. Give the second race of the year to the number 04 Toyota Tundra. The Duval Creative Machine goes to victory lane in Hotlanta tonight, Evan.
And he has been hot to start this 2021 season. A runner-up finish in the season opener at the Las Vegas Motor Speedway, and now he gets his first win of this RTP qualifying series. Derek Bordeaux, the checkered, and even a good night as well. Colin Keister, guys, we talked trends. Bordeaux, Keister were 2-3 at Vegas. They are 1-2 here tonight at Atlanta. Statement for both of those drivers, but the 16 machine up front, the one that gets to celebrate.
Believe they're going to go up to first and second in the overall points of the Road to Pro qualifying series, as well as Bordeaux, I think, had a few miscues on his burnout there, but he won't mind. They don't need that truck for Richmond, I think. You're going to bring a different package to the capital of the Commonwealth anyway. But we'll take a look at the full field rundown, tell you where your favorite driver finished. Derek Bordeaux is your winner tonight ahead of Colin Keister, and those two will go to tops in the point standings. It will be those two 1 and 2 when we go to Richmond next week. Justin Bolton with a strong finish. He was third this evening. Tucker Minter finishes 4th. 5th goes to the Casey Tucker Machine. Donovan Strauss came home 6th. 7th belonged to Seth DeMerchant. Jordy Lopez Jr. finished in 8th. 9th went to Parker Retzlaff. And Daniel Roper finished in the 10th position, Evan.
And continuing on through, Boyd Hogan ends up plus 10 spots for 11th position. All big movers for Alex McCollum and Brian LaPratt in 12th and 13th. Brandon Bullo's quiet in the second half as he trickled down to 14th, and Michael Finlayson is 15th. Logan Kress plus 18 positions. Your second biggest mover ends up 16th, ahead of Brad Mahar in 17th. And a Carson Hocevar, final driver on the lead lap, P18, tailed by 19th place finisher Brian Mercurio and Devin Curl in 20th.
Down the rest of the order as we finish out this race from Atlanta. Connor Horn, Cody Bias, Larry Pace, Dylan Alt, and Justin Levine all finishing only 1 lap down. Then Blake Neer finishing 2 down. Then it's the drivers with some issues today. Kevin King, Justin Lisenby, Drew Farinaj, Tyler Severa, and then the final 4 cars to finish out the field, all with issues today, and unfortunate issues for all of them. Matt Danson, Trayton Lapsevich, Anthony Burrows, and Jarrett Liebert rounding out 34 cars, but an amazing win for Derek Bordeaux as he takes race number 2 of the championship.
Derek Bordeaux, your winner in Atlanta, and a strong run for him. But Jeff McConey, we're going to take a moment here. We're going to interview the driver that finished in P6. We'll bring Donovan Strauss from Elliott Sadler Esports into the booth, and Jeff will catch up with the man behind the number 51 to hear how his evening went.
Donovan, it's Jeff up in the booth. You got a copy?
Yeah, I got you.
Well, you had a great run out there tonight. Another solid run. It looked like at one point you were looking to save fuel and be consistent and just maintain that position there. What was your mindset at the beginning of the race, your plan from the beginning, and how much should that predetermined strategy change throughout?
At the start, I think we started 11th, and we had a tight phase in our car or truck where we'd get tight for a little bit and we'd fall back. So I was just trying to trying to get through that. And then once we got through that, our long run speed was incredible. Like, it was insane. And I was able to get up to, I think it was 7th, 6th, and I was coming towards the front, and then we got that yellow when we pit. So then it kind of threw me off because I didn't take tires in a caution. So we were just stuck in a hole, but I ended up recovering for 6th, which is incredible.
It certainly is. You had a really strong run out there, and like you said, the long run was definitely there on the car. So at a track like this where the long run speed, you might not get a full fuel run out of the car. Do you think that you needed a little bit more on the short run? You could have gotten a little more out of it, or do you think you guys nailed it and it just ended up falling the way it fell? Because either way, 6th place is a very solid run.
Personally, I think we got the best wheel we were going to get out of it. I think we had a chance to win, to be honest. I think we had a truck that could have won if cards fell our ways, but ended up P6. I can't thank everyone at Elliott Sadler Esports, Lowline Racing, everybody for the hard work the past 2 weeks. Can't thank JD enough for making me look good every time I'm on the track. Can't thank everyone that's watching, Burnt Rubber Media, everyone. Thank you so much.
Well, I was gonna say my next question was gonna be, who do you have to thank for putting this all together here? But you're already a pro at doing this, so you already know who you got to thank and everything that gets done. So great run out there. But last question then, what are your thoughts going into the next race at Richmond? You're going from these 1.5-mile tracks, these big long tracks, to a short track, and a very difficult one at that, where you're lifting almost at the start-finish line just after it, and then you're diving hard into turn 3. Do you think it's going to be a game of just protecting the bottom, and what are you expecting going into that race?
Richmond is ironically my best track, so I'm going in there hoping I can back this up and back what I did at Vegas up, and hopefully improve and, maybe have a shot to win. But honestly, this first round, just trying to get solid results. I'll take anything I can get, and I'm pretty sure it's going to be about protecting the bottom throughout the race. I think the good cars will be able to roll the bottom. I'm sure you'll see some people move up, but I think the best cars are going to be on the bottom the entire race, so it should be a fun race.
Absolutely, and everyone out there watching, you can catch that race live right here. That's going to be 2 Thursdays from now, not next week, but the week after, and see if Donovan Strauss can gain 5 more positions and take home a win at what he claims is his best track. Let's see if he can back it up out there, stay out of trouble, and bring home a win, but that is yet to be seen.
Thank you, Jeff.
Absolutely, great run out there, Donovan.
Donovan Strauss comes home with a solid P6. The man who finished just ahead of him was the hardest charger of the evening and played the pit strategy pretty well when we got that first yellow flag. Casey Tucker started in 28th, finished 5th, and is with our Josh Lee.
Casey Tucker, you got a copy?
Yes, sir. I'm here.
All right, well, all I can say about that race was just an amazing cut through the field for you, up 23 spots from where you originally started. What happened in qualifying is where I'm going to start. You started in 28th. Was it a bad lap, top of the wall? What exactly happened?
We had a pretty bad lap in qualifying. I had been practicing a race for the past, about week and a half or however long this build's been out and correct. And I wasn't prepared for what you had to do to make it go fast, and I just I missed turn 3 and 4 and got tight, and that was about it.
And then you started making your way up through the field. What was the toughest part of making your way up through the field, trying to gain those spots back? Because we saw a lot of drivers struggle with passing, choosing a lane, struggle with the tire wear. What was that toughest part for you behind the wheel of that 28 machine?
For me, it would be dirty air. It's real hard to pass a truck if he runs your line. And then getting a pass completed on the bottom, you have to be about, maybe a 10th or 2, maybe 3 faster. So I was struggling a lot with that. But I was kind of biding my time at the start, just riding in the back, feeling it out, seeing how the truck was doing, seeing how the race was developing. And they had a little incident in front of me, and then I went into cruise control, and I pretty much had my bed made. I had to go long and hope for a caution, and lucky enough we got one. And that was pretty much all I was feeling for the beginning of the race, was just sit around and chill.
What about that latter half of the race? Because that was when a lot of drivers started to struggle and when the cream of the crop started to rise to the top. Derek Bordeaux, Colin Keister, Justin Bolton, top three really started showing themselves in that last half of the race. Were you trying to flex your muscle there in the final half of the race? You came home in 5th, and a lot of that position was gained in the back half of the race. So was it a lot of racing in the back half, trying to push a little bit more than you did in the first half?
Part of it, yeah, and then the caution, obviously, we got lucky with that on the pit cycle, got us up front. Then we stayed up there, obviously. I felt like we had a pretty good truck. I honestly think we would have had a good enough truck to contend with the leader there, but, you know, you get kind of stuck in traffic and you're not trying to be aggressive and just bring home a good finish. And I pride myself on coming from the back of these things. I did it a good bit last year, and I did it last week as well. We went back to 32nd place on the last restart and brought it back up to 11th. So it's a lot of fun driving through the field, and you know, you get a feel for who you can race around, race clean, and I try to race everybody as clean as I can. I got into Roper there a little bit in the middle part of the race whenever he was letting me go, and I apologize for that. But we had a good truck. I stayed up front, and believe me, there was no chilling after I got up there. It was all go. The truck was good though. I got to thank everybody at Bobby Dale Earnhardt Legacy Esports. I got to thank Abruzzi, Hillweld, VRS, Race Static, and Reaper Speed Labs. You know, everybody on our team, man, we put together a piece. We thought we were going to be junk, but we came out here and we had a pretty solid piece. I'll admit it. I didn't know I was going to be able to hold off Strauss there at the end, but we managed to pull it off.
Thank you very much for joining us here in the Podium Esports booth. Casey, congratulations on your top 5.
Thank you, guys. Thank you for streaming.
Casey Tucker with a top 5 finish, and he'll look to improve upon that just a little bit as we turn our attention towards Richmond Raceway coming up in a few weeks' time. Jeff McConey, it's a track that a lot of these folks know well. Richmond, of course, very involved with the top level of sim racing, and further down too. They've got Richmond Raceway Esports in the Coke Series, and then the driver development program, which now has a driver in the Coke Series in Garrett Main. So do we have any early predictions, expectations for our first short track race of the season?
The first name that comes to mind is Parker Retzlaff, because he is so strong on the short track. So that's where he got his start. That's where he runs the most. He's on the short track side, does a lot of ARCA stuff, which is primarily based around short track. So he's definitely going to be a strong name. He's got a lot of good teammates behind him, Trayton Lapsevich, Boyd Hogan, both guys that are also very strong on the short tracks. Keep an eye on them. Casey Tucker's a member of Legacy as well. So he comes home 5th here at Atlanta, a 1.5 mile track. He could do very well at Richmond. We're going from these big 1.5 mile tracks, though, where you're all about carrying momentum and getting the most out of your tires and doing everything you possibly can, and your primary concern is that tire wear. Going now into a race that's all about short track racing, you have to be aggressive. You have to bully people out of the way sometimes, and you can't be afraid to use the bumper. This is the most competitive series that we've seen. We talked about that at length earlier, but when you're out there, you have to be aggressive. You have to get every single little bit that you can. Short track racing is not about making friends, and I think at the end of it, if your feelings aren't hurt, then you weren't racing hard enough out there. It's going to be aggressive, but it's going to be a very fun one to watch.
Old school, real short track racing, Josh Lee. It's what race fans love to see. It harkens back to the origins of the sport of NASCAR back in the even 1930s, 1940s. And Richmond, a place with some fabled history, celebrating their 75th anniversary this year. So you know you're going to see some classic style racing when we get there in a few Thursdays.
Oh, we're going to see bumping and banging. We're going to see the tires wear very quickly, all the classic short track stuff. And I'm watching those drivers who have that short track experience, but I'm also watching the drivers who are consistent over to Las Vegas and Atlanta. Yes, they're different racetracks, but they're both 1.5 mile intermediate racetracks. This is the first major track change we have had of the Road to Pro qualifying series season. So will Colin Keister be up there again? Will Bordeaux be up there again? Will Bolton be up there again? Will more of these consistent names who got top 10s in both Las Vegas and Atlanta be up there again? That question's going to have to be answered in 2 weeks' time.
And maybe not a surprise, these opening races here, it's the drivers who have experience versus some of the newer names that have come in and absolutely just smashed it these first few weeks. So I'm guessing you're thinking, Evan, that's probably going to stay the same over the course of the next few weeks. Or is there a new name that we haven't seen, we haven't expected, that might jump up and do something? Maybe like a McCollum in particular, who we know is so great in the super late model on the short tracks.
Well, things have been very pretty so far, right? I mean, you had a race in Las Vegas and a race here at Atlanta with the minimal cautions where drivers could kind of go based on the plan, right? They had a strategy for pit stops. They kind of were able to execute. They were able to work around the racetrack, find where they wanted to go. They were able to be comfortable at many points. Aside from the restarts, they kind of knew what they were going to get, right? Gave opportunities for some of those guys, like we just heard here post-race, to not queue well, come back from it. That's not really going to continue when we go to Richmond, right? It's going to get a little bit more messy. I want to see how these guys handle a bit more of that unknown, a bit more of that chaos, right? You couldn't get any different going from Atlanta to Richmond, but not just that. You got Talladega coming up. You got some more tracks where these drivers are going to be put in a more uncomfortable position. That's what I'm looking for, is can you stick with it? Can you keep your head on top of you? Can you adjust strategy on the fly when things get a little bit messy and off plan?
Chaos. I like that word, and I think for Richmond it's very fitting because way back in the day, it was the Chaos Crew before it was Richmond Raceway Esports. So fitting then maybe that chaos might be the operative word that we're going to see used at Richmond Raceway in a few weeks' time. Before we get there, though, some more action coming your way between the world of Podium Esports and iRacing. Tomorrow night, it is the PCA Sim Racing Zone Group Challenge from Road America on twitch.tv/Podium2 and the YouTube and Facebook pages for Podium Esports and the PCA Sim Racing YouTube channel. Seeing all the action as some of the best of the Porsche Club of America go road racing in the 911 GT3 Cup cars at the road course in Wisconsin. Sunday night, the MPI Cup Series returns to action from Dover International Speedway. That's a 9:15 p.m. start time on twitch.tv/Podium Esports. The big one, Monday night racing presented by Tufco Flooring, is in the trucks at Atlanta, just like you saw tonight, except it's for the championship of Season 2, and it's with big-time names. How about Adam Alexander, Larry McReynolds, and Daryl Waltrip? These three men from Fox Sports are going to be the ones you hear on the broadcast on Monday night, right here on twitch.tv/Podium Esports. You are not going to want to miss that event. And then, if that isn't enough for you, we've got a smattering coming up on Wednesday. You've got the Pro Invitational Series on Fox Sports 1. You've also got the Dirt Sprint Car Championship Series from Williams Grove. That race will go at 9 p.m. Eastern on twitch.tv/Podium2, and then the Podium Facebook and YouTube pages as well. Then next Saturday, it's the Midwest Sim Racing Association Premier Series from the dirt track at Bristol Motor Speedway. 8 p.m. start time for that on the Podium 2 Twitch, and then the Podium Facebook, Podium YouTube, and then eNASCAR Coca-Cola iRacing Series action returns from Auto Club at the end of the bunch, March 30th, 8:30 p.m. Eastern start time for that on iRacing's channels. And then the eNASCAR Road to Pro qualifying iRacing Series returns April 8th, 9 p.m. Eastern, right here, twitch.tv/Podium Esports from Richmond Raceway for round 3 of the season. A tremendous thank you to all the folks that helped make tonight's broadcast possible. For our team on the back end of Podium Esports, Gary Sexton, Cisco Scalmuza, and John Theodore. For tonight's producer, and for my colleagues in the booth this evening, Jeff Bocconi, Joshua Lee, and Evan Pachoco, I am James Pike, the voice of Podium Esports. Thank you so much for watching our broadcast of the eNASCAR Road to Pro qualifying iRacing Series, and we will see you in 3 weeks' time from Richmond Raceway.